everything.
Yeah. This is serious. This will be
Where do you go?
You got it, come on, man. She's just getting
Hi. Nice to see you as well.
My name is Ron.
Sandra Fluke. Nice to see you. Fluke, like Fluke. Well, you appear to already know who I am, but I'll pass out my business cards anyway.
Okay.
There you are. Take one and place them down.
All right, so today we have none other than Sandra Fluke.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. And of course, we all know who she is, but in addition, she is one of us. She wrote her first diary in Daily Kos about 2 weeks ago, and as far as I know, it got more recommends than any first diary ever in Daily Kos. If somebody can prove me otherwise, please let me know. But she got over 700 recommends in her first diary, and that's very unusual. And then she's done 2 more diaries as well. So, and they're all recommended. So here we have one of us who's running for the California Senate from District 26. Okay, and so without any further, here is Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you. You actually did the name pronunciation very, very well. I don't spend too much time worrying about it, but my mom was a public school teacher in kindergarten, and so she would tell all of her students, my name is Mrs. Fluke. It rhymes with book because I like to read. So the kids in the town where I grew up knew how to pronounce it, but after I left there, I don't worry about it anymore. We had a 5K for Fluke a few weekends ago where we had volunteers knocking on 5,000 doors, and I'm pretty sure that about 75% of them thought they were participating in a 5K for Fluke, which as long as they're knocking on doors, I don't mind. Hello everyone, and thank you for having me and inviting me to come and talk with you. I have to say that, I hope this is clear in my work. I'm the type of activist and advocate who really understands the power of media in reaching the grassroots, and I try to use it as effectively as I can, and because of that, I have a great deal of respect for the work that all of you do, blogging and getting the word out about things that the mainstream media doesn't always cover in the way that they should, and really breaking a lot of stories. So I want to say thank you for the kind of amazing grassroots media work that all of you do. You can give yourselves a round of applause too. So, you're probably a more informed audience than many that I speak to about the aspects of my life that have been in the spotlight. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the parts that haven't, and just tell you a little bit about where I came from. And I'm mostly looking forward to getting to do Q&A and have more of a conversation. So I actually grew up in very rural Pennsylvania, a conservative area halfway between Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, close to the Maryland line. James Carville, who's a very nice guy, technically refers to the area as Alabama, Pennsylvania, which, no disrespect to Alabama intended, but it's quite a conservative place, and one with some socioeconomic challenges. So I'm a little bit of a refugee here in Los Angeles. We talk about our chosen family, right? This is my chosen home because I needed to search out the kind of place that really reflected my values and where I felt very much at home in the community. Growing up, I actually saw a lot of things happening that just didn't seem quite right. Those, you say small, but they're not small, those instances of discrimination that we see in everyday life. But I didn't have yet the worldview and the perspective to be able to push back on it and to say how things should be and why I thought that this was wrong. So for me, college was that opening up experience that it is for so many students, and that's a big part of why I really believe in the accessibility and affordability of higher education, because it made a tremendous difference for me, and I see the impact that it has on that community back there where there aren't a lot of educational and employment opportunities. My the high school that I went to was a public school, and the chair of the school board actually didn't have a high school degree, had dropped out, and was really proud of that. And I believe in everyone pursuing opportunities, but this gentleman was definitely not interested in a GED. And so I've seen what it looks like when we don't invest in education, and that kind of background shapes my understanding. I also came from a family where there was a lot of union membership, and my dad worked in factories that unfortunately came and went over and over again. So that's another way that my perspective on economic justice has been shaped. So, for the last 10 years, I've been working on legislative advocacy. I'm best known for my work on reproductive rights, but it's actually been a lot of different progressive issues. So standing with fast food workers, for example, you are all very familiar with the living wage fight that fast food workers are engaging in right now. Here in Los Angeles, we have the Raise LA movement that I've been a part of to make sure that hotel workers also get to a living wage. And I'm really proud to have stood with working men and women on these kinds of issues, including social workers in Los Angeles who were fighting for the ability to keep their caseloads at a manageable level, to be able to really care for the kids that were assigned to them. I actually saw the impact of that policy firsthand, because the other part of my work is that I am a social justice attorney who represents survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. And so I had shared a lot of clients with those social workers and saw what kind of challenges they had when they had too many kids that they were trying to keep safe. Some other issues that I've worked a lot on, early childhood education. I've been a part of Raising California Together for a while now. It's a coalition that pushes for investment in early childhood education. And we often talk about education overall as a silver bullet. I think early childhood ed is like the gold bullet, because, it's the place where we can most effectively invest and sort of most efficiently almost, because it pays dividends for the rest of a child's educational career. And if we want to close the achievement gap for low-income families, and of course that often correlates with families of color, that's the place where we invest. So it's a smart way to spend our educational dollars, but it also has such an impact on the rest of the family. It's not just about the kids, because we know that women are still disproportionately the caretakers. And if we give affordable access to this kind of quality childcare, then women and other caretakers can pursue their careers and can be able to afford an economic stability for their home and for their family. So I'm very passionate about early childhood education, but we've seen some bills recently in the legislature that took money out of the public school system to fund early childhood ed, and that can't be the solution either, because we're already about 47th, I believe, in per pupil investment in California. It's disgraceful, and we all know that what's at the root of that is Prop 13. And so I've talked a lot during this campaign about the need for tax reform around Prop 13, closing corporate loopholes and making sure that we're getting to a split roll. It's actually a fascinating issue. Thank you. It's actually a fascinating issue that I would be interested in hearing what you guys think on it, because when I talk to some of the press reporters, they act like Prop 13 is still the third rail of California politics, and if you campaign on doing something about it, you'll end your political career, and their faces turn ashen when I mention it. But when I talk to voters at absolutely every forum and every event, people come up to me and say, but what are you going to do about Prop 13? So I think we're actually seeing a place where the citizenry, the population, is really ready for change, and the political establishment and the media establishment hasn't figured that out yet. So I'm very anxious to start pushing on this and demonstrating that the house is not going to fall down if we actually reform this policy from decades ago that is holding us back on our ability to make progress on so many areas. Because making progress means having resources and flexibility to invest, and right now our hands are tied on this policy. I've also worked with Young Invincibles, they have a pretty good online presence. Some of you may know of Young Invincibles. Check them out. They're an organization that works on economic concerns of young adults, which the first one that comes to mind is being able to afford college, and after you go, being able to afford to pay back your loans. So So I've done work on student loan repayment, or on the interest rates and some of the plans for how repayment happens. And I'm very concerned about what's happening in California specifically, because we know that the tuition increases for the UC and Cal State system in the last 5 years have just been staggering. And it's not just the tuition increases, the fees are where students are really being hit, because that's disguised as if that's not money, that's a fee, that's different, but in the end it's the same kind of financial impact on students. So we have to get back toward what the master plan was, both for the sake of young people and students and their families who are struggling to afford college and to be able to pay it back, but also for the sake of the rest of our economy. Because this is a big part of our tax base, it's about our economic future as a state. One of the reasons we are so successful as a state is because we had that master plan for public higher education, and so moving away from that is really a recipe for disaster economically. We've actually seen already that the housing market is being impacted by the fact that we have so many unemployed young adults, record levels. I think we have about 740,000 between the ages of 18 and 24 just in California. And so they're not able to afford to buy their first home, and it's keeping the housing market sluggish. So I'd really like to see us have programs that look like AmeriCorps, only on the state level, so that young people could be gaining job skills, giving back to their communities at the same time as having wages rather than being on unemployment, right? Those are some of the things I'm focusing on. Of course, I am passionate about social justice. That's where I've spent much of my time. I think one of the first bills that I ever helped to get passed was a gay rights bill, and we still have a long way to go, especially for the trans community, around economic concerns in that community especially. I am very passionate about environmental protection. I am encouraged to see a moratorium on fracking. Seems to actually be making some progress.
No.
Right, it got stuck in committee the other day, didn't it?
Sadly,
it was making progress, and then it got stuck in committee the other day. But at the city council level, we have been making progress in Los Angeles.
That's true.
Yeah. So that's a good sign, but the rest of the state needs to be coming along as well. And I've also been talking about how that links to our water crisis, because I think that's one of the things people don't think about. They know about the health impacts of fracking, things like kids having nosebleeds here in Los Angeles from the chemicals, but they know about the seismic tremors that are caused, which I just cannot believe that we are messing with this in California, given the risks we already have. But then on top of that, if you think about how fracking works, it's water being pumped down into these wells, and it's being mixed with chemicals that the oil companies haven't revealed what those chemicals actually are. So we're just contaminating water that we're never going to be able to recycle. I want to see us do more on water recycling, but fracking really does exacerbate this problem. So there are a lot of environmental concerns that I'm anxious to take on, but one of the things that I've always been passionate about, and this campaign has only strengthened my resolve on, is campaign finance reform and ethics concerns. You know, it is staggering. You know, I'm really, really proud of my campaign, actually, because we have over 1,800 individual donors. Our average donation size is about $240 a piece. And that's how campaigns should be run. Not on huge special interest checks, but on individual voters, individual donors who care about what direction their government is going and where they want to see their elected officials be on policy issues. So I'm really proud of that, but I've seen the kinds of special interest money that is flooding into some of the other candidates' accounts in my own race and throughout the state, and we need to get really serious on this issue and be doing absolutely everything we can. You know, it's tough with the Supreme Court where they are, but there are steps we could take as a state. And on all of these issues, I really believe that California has a responsibility to be leading the way, because we are a progressive bastion here, and we should be doing more than we are. It should not be the case that when the Democrats had a supermajority in Sacramento, the Chamber of Commerce, which is quite conservative at the state level, got through all but one of their priorities. That's not a record that is sufficient for delivering on what California needs. So I want to see us be putting forward the kind of legislation that will be copied in other blue states and will help us to really put pressure on DC as well. I'm very proud of the Domestic Worker Bill of Rights, which was a bill that I helped to get signed this past fall by Governor Brown. We fought for several years to get that legislation through, and it really symbolizes several things that I want to be hallmarks of the legislation that I work on. First of all, it's path breaking. We're one of the first 3 states in the country to pass legislation addressing the lack of employment protections for domestic workers. They were left out of the basic employment laws because in 75 years ago and still today, they're often workers of color, and they were left out as a sector. So it's path-breaking legislation, and it was accomplished through the grassroots. And I mean grassroots. We had domestic workers on buses for 6-hour drives to Sacramento over and over and over again. These were folks who were, for the first time, being involved in the legislative process and just demanding to be heard by their representatives. And it's one of the most inspiring movements that I've had the honor to be a part of. And I'm really proud of that legislation, and I want to see more like it. That's what I want my career to be about, is amplifying those kinds of voices. So I've politicianed for long enough now. I want to actually answer some questions that you guys have. Yes?
When did you come to California and what brought you here?
Yeah, it's been, about 7 years, I guess. There were a few things that brought me out here. One was the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking is based here, CAST, and I think they're one of the best organizations in the country for their work on human trafficking. Unfortunately, part of the reason that they're the best is that LA is one of the top 5 points of entry for human trafficking in the country, and that comes from a couple of reasons. It's the fact that we have an agricultural sector around Los Angeles, so we get a lot of labor trafficking. We're also close to Mexico, and because of the port and the airport, we're a gateway to Asia. So we get international, transnational movement. Our entertainment sector, as important as it is for our economy, actually gets exploited by people who say to young girls, I'm going to take you to Hollywood, you're going to be a star, you're going to be a model, you're going to be a singer. And so, unfortunately, we get a lot of domestic sex trafficking coming from within the US to here in LA because of that. And often ending up either in sex trafficking or on the streets or in the pornographic industry, which is big in the Valley. And lastly, I think the final factor is that our gang problem that we certainly still have in Los Angeles. There are a lot of gangs that have figured out that it is a much better idea to sell girls than drugs, because drugs you can sell once, and a girl you can sell over and over again. And unfortunately, sometimes the law enforcement scrutiny isn't as great. So we're working a lot on that problem. I've worked on a number of bills at the state level on this, and have represented these girls myself, and I'm proud to be working with folks like State Senator Holly Mitchell, County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, and a number of others to make progress on human trafficking. So part of the reason I came to LA was to work with that organization. Another part of it was that my now husband, at the time my longtime partner, is in the entertainment industry, and he came here for those types of career opportunities. Of course, we're dealing with such a degree of runaway production that sometimes it feels like maybe he should have gone to Vancouver or Toronto if he wanted to be in the entertainment industry. So I am very committed to those kinds of issues, to working on the film tax credit, for example, and keeping production here in Los Angeles. But we really love LA. It's our home. You know, as I said, we found a community that shares our values, but it's also a pace of life and a respect for health and for the environment that feels right for us. Yes?
Same question I asked last week to the other candidate. As a member of the legislature, you'll be helping to oversee other aspects of the state government. And one of the state departments that I care very much about is the state parks. which were very important, have also had a lot of problems in recent years with administration. And it kind of becomes hard to ask for more funding for state parks, which I think we need, when they find that, oh, here's 40 million that disappeared and, that kind of thing. So I was wondering how you see your role as a legislator in terms of oversight of other parts of the government, especially the Parks Department.
Well, I think there's a lot that we can accomplish with auditing. I've already called for an audit on equal pay, for example, because I believe there are some pay discrepancies happening for female and male legislative staff within the government, and also for our subcontractors. And I think the government has to be leading the way on this issue. I am concerned about what's happening in the Parks Department, what's happening on high-speed rail, for example, where the financial mismanagement has just been catastrophic. I would like to see us be able to be expanding our parks programs, especially in low-income communities where there is a significant lack of green space. But as you said, that's quite hard to do when there's mismanagement happening. So that has to be addressed. In terms of parks, I really like what is being done by groups like Ciclovia to try to reclaim other types of open space, so that even in communities where we don't have the privilege of having so much park space, we can take over a street for a weekend and give opportunities to be outside in other creative ways and in ways that fuel our cultural change around using bikes and walking and public transit as well. But the thing about, coming back to your original question about oversight of other departments, I think auditing can only be the beginning. And that's where the next step has to be getting that information actually out to the public and really connecting with people and getting them to understand the consequences and really care about these issues. And I think that's an area where I am unique in the field of candidates in this race, and I think sort of generally in folks who are running for elected office, is that I've spent a lot of time as an advocate understanding how to use media messaging, how to reach people through social media and mass communication channels, and I understand the power of that and what works and what doesn't. So one of the things that I will absolutely continue as a legislator is engaging in that way and drawing attention to issues that might not otherwise get the spotlight. I believe that, I want my style to be seen as being an activist legislator, one who really connects with the community and involves people in the passage of legislation as well as the implementation of legislation. Because too often you see bills getting passed in Sacramento, but no one in Los Angeles knows that it happened, and so then it doesn't really change people's lives until they really know that they have this new right or that there is this new regulation. So that's one of my, I would say, strategic strengths and differences from other folks. Yes?
One thing that I'm involved with is healthcare reform. Obamacare has been good for many people in California. 1.3 million Californians have registered through Covered California.
Myself included.
Me too. Having said that, there's still about 3.5 to 4 million people that are qualified, but they haven't registered. Most of them happen to be Latinos and young people. My question is, can you do something in Sacramento about that? And what do you think about single payer as the next step?
Yeah, so first of all, absolutely, we can do something in Sacramento about that. There's a couple of reasons that Latinos and young people are the categories where we don't have as high of rates of sign up as we would like. On young people, for starters, I talked about Young Invincibles as a group that works on economic issues for young people. One other huge economic issue that we worked on is health insurance affordability and the kind of rates that young people were facing. I think Covered California could be doing more to reach out to young people and to really get them enrolled. When we started this process of reform, we were the most uninsured generation. So there is more we can do in terms of outreach to specific groups that know how to reach young people, rather than Covered California trying to sort of reinvent the wheel on this one. With Latinos, and this is true of some other ethnic groups,